I can hear the bird life.
There we go. The bird life is there. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to start. So welcome. This is the first ever episode of Startup Success Students. As students of success, we're always impressed by people like Alex here, who set out to achieve something life-changing in his life. And he's made it happen. There's lots of learnings along the way, no doubt. Some are quite subtle, but yet quite profound. And others are going to be more like tsunamis, right? Huge learnings that overtook you and maybe allowed you to discover some new depth, which then allows you to go to a new height as well. So all of that we're interested in. Today we've got Alex Papworth with us. Alex, say hello.
Hi, Ryan.
So we'll
Nice to
get
have
into
you
more
in.
about, yeah, nice to have you here, mate. We'll get more into, who's Alex? What does Alex do? How has Alex ended up in the position that he's in now, starting startups and enjoying himself, having a jolly good time. And we'll learn more about how nature is important for you as well, no doubt, throughout the top of this
Definitely, yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
A bit of a shameless plug before we dive into that, though.
Go for it,
Obviously,
no
if you,
shame required.
yeah, yeah. If you are a small business owner and you've got a working recipe of success and you want to take it to the next level, myself, my consultancy, Transforming Perceptions, we do have a program ready and waiting for you with some amazing success stories. Actually, we've helped our first client triple their revenue in just 10 weeks. So how it works, we take you through a 3-step process that allows you to get super laser focused on your customer, allows you to figure out how to get out of your own way and get optimized in the way that you work. But really, the Mona Lisa of all of that is to allow you to get the infrastructure for your business that allows you to collect data on your customers so that you know where you can grow your business. And really, that is how we've managed to get those results so quickly. But it's loads of things involved in that program. If you want to learn more about how we support with technology, with the financing, the analysis of your finances, the strategy, the operation, the innovation, there'll be some information in below this somewhere on YouTube. So check it out. If you listen to this on another platform, try and find me and drop me a message if you want to find out more. Obviously, I've got quite a unique name. You should be able to find me. All right. So first things first, Alex, what made you come on the podcast today, mate?
Yeah, what made it become a podcast? Well, firstly, you asked me, and I'm always willing to help and always willing to help, and I'm happy to help. I mean, help, whatever. I'm happy to play a role, whatever you want to call it. And then when I answered the questions you introduced, I thought it's odd actually. Don't really think of myself as a startup for whatever reason, but when you asked some questions, it helped me. I thought, well, this is interesting. It could be useful. I'm always curious about just exploring and digging deeper into things generally anyway. So this whole sort of format of going deeper, I like the going deep and discovering the heights at the same time. I like that. So so it's fun for me, and just interested in trying new things. So yeah.
Brilliant. Awesome. So listen, we're going to go probably for a more high level understanding of what you do right now as of the 18th of May. We want to try and understand what you do right now. So maybe you could just introduce that to everyone who's watching as well. Just what are you doing right now? What is your startup that's not a startup that probably is a startup?
Yeah. It's just the language, isn't it? I'm just not used to using that language for whatever reason. Yeah. Well, I think I mean there are multiple aspects to this, but I think it's probably going to be easiest if I focus on one. But maybe just to give a bit of a context around me to sort of position that a little bit. So explain why I might have multiple startups in theory, albeit some more started and upped than others. So,
Awesome.
so I would
Brilliant.
say
Yeah.
that,
Tell us.
yeah. So me is one of my sort of insights over the last 3 years is about who I am as a person, what I enjoy, and the best word I found that still works in that sort of self-discovery period is adventurer. So
Cool.
I enjoy new and unknown and exciting challenges that
Yeah.
usually are worthwhile. I'm not adventuring just for its own sake. So that sort of comes with that territory, I suppose, is probably an element of getting easily bored, wanting new challenges. So hence, I think when I talk about startups, I'm always looking for new ideas, and I need to. I want things to land and be successful, but then running them and sort of making them work. he's
And
probably
yeah,
left.
and that sense of adventure and starting things new is perfect for what you're doing at the moment, isn't it? So I know you invited me to one campfire, but for whatever reason, my calendar's just never let me attend at the
Yeah,
times when it lands. But maybe you could just tell us a bit more about what you do now. Like, what is the campfire? How do you
yeah,
help leaders connect better with nature?
yeah. So Bridging the Campfire, it's called. So it was, and this is sort of an H connection. At the end of last year, I found myself writing a couple of stories. One called The Bridge, and one called The Campfire. The Bridge was like a reflective piece about my story, which was quite
Okay.
metaphorical. And really, and the sort of the customer in startup terms here is someone who's gone a similar journey to me, in the sense of probably having a corporate career or a profession and feeling a sense of dissatisfaction, maybe a bit of disillusionment with that, seeing that they're trapped actually to some extent in a bit of a
Yeah.
box. Doesn't there's the sort of joy. I mean, I wasn't even used to thinking about whether you could get joy from it, but that was the person I was. So the customer, the person I want to help, and my story, which I think is plenty of people might resonate with, is about people who are looking to find some joy, some satisfaction, some fulfillment in their career, and really starting to question what they're doing at the moment. And that was the story. The Bridge was about that in a metaphorical way. So based on my reflections, but in essence, the sort of story there is about money and connections in the sense of connecting with people, connecting with nature, and rebalancing. So I think I live in a world. I think we all live in a world where money is too important. So I'm
Yeah.
saying it's important. And I'm just trying to suggest that maybe we move more towards making connections with ourselves, with others, with nature, and just not money is evil. I used to have a bit of a allergy to money over the last year or so, getting
Yeah.
rid of because it's not particularly useful. But it's just a rebalancing more towards connecting with yourself, actually, majorly, to be honest with you, knowing
Cool.
yourself, knowing where the joy comes from, and enjoying what you do. So I think that's sort of my
They
question.
are very deep questions, aren't they, that you've been kind of going through in your mind, and that's led you to this new startup, which I know, because I know you from working together in the past. That is very much your character, right? You are very much about the connection to things and the deeper connection to life as well. And I remember when we were working together, it was actually there were moments where we would talk and we would discuss together, and you would kind of say, like, I don't really feel happy right now doing this right now, and I feel like there should be something else, but I just haven't worked it out yet. So to see that you're now in that kind of position where you're actually backing yourself and you know what it is that you want, and you've done some personal discovery, it's amazing for me to see. A very inspiring for me as well, if I'm honest with you. It is very deep questions. Who am I? What do I want? When does it end? When do we stop asking ourselves these questions, eh? But what I'm interested in is you mentioned there a bit of a before and after, didn't you? You mentioned like you're now in a new position, but you were somewhere before, and maybe the way you saw the world, your beliefs, your values, maybe they were slightly different before when you were working for the corporate man. So
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about that old mindset, if it's not too painful for you. Like, what
Nice.
characterizes it? How do you see that now? How does that old world feel to you now, and how would you describe it to someone?
Well, it was a little while coming. I'd sort of put it back to 10 years ago, so around 2009, 2010. And I can make a startup connection because that's when I left. Actually, I was in a startup. I've been involved in a few startups, but I've had a few decades, so it's not been my life, but I've had a few startup opportunities, and I've always enjoyed them actually. And it's the adventure thing. It's like the buzz is obviously an environment I enjoy, and then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is the bit that pays, which is the corporate business analyst, mainly working in finance, which is where you do your job and you fit into that role, and you understand what the business needs are and get involved in change. And I think that's been unfulfilling for about 10 years, and I felt the need. I had more to offer. The adventurous. The adventure story really doesn't fit into that business analyst.
No, well, I mean, Yeah, I guess no discredit to any business analysts that are out there, or anyone that's transitioned into being, especially anyone who's transitioned into being a product owner or something. I guess it's a bit more hands-on as well, a bit more involved, that role. But yeah, definitely, there's the only adventure you're going to find is within the remit of the one journey that you're studying and the one set of customers that you're trying to find. And every day for however long you're working on that project for, you're kind of constrained. There's not a lot of adventure, and your working week takes up your life, doesn't it?
It's a personal story, so I don't certainly meant to diss it in any way, but it's just my perspective on it.
Yeah.
And it's been around for it's been around for a while, so probably it was a bit more Wild West 20 years ago as well. So
true.
People would often say, well, what is it you do? And sometimes it was quite difficult to explain, which I think is quite the secret as well, and perhaps why it attracted me, because it was like, well, it's not all these other things, and it's the cracks, it's the differences, it's the gaps in between. But as time's gone on, it's become much more contractual and much more mechanical.
Okay.
So I think maybe it's evolved, and the walls have closed in a bit for me. So, but ultimately, it was it's like a before and after. It's I mean, back to your point, I think what I was looking to do was to escape from the box. The sort of revelation is, well, and I sort of knew this. It's like you need to know where you're going. You can't just you can run away from something, but it's much better if you're running towards something. It's a lot more motivating.
Yeah.
So the start of that, and the trouble with being an adventurer as well is there isn't one thing that you want to do. So it's like this is my life's mission. My last mission is to do different things all the time. So it's actually quite difficult. It's quite hard. So I tagged on at, I don't know if we're mentioning companies here, but we both worked at Lloyd's Bank.
Yeah.
And I found myself using the words inspired and excited in the first year, which is absolutely not what I associate with that company before. So it was like, I want to swear, but I'm not going to. But it was a bit of a bloody hell.
Yeah.
I don't remember saying that when I just didn't remember saying that before. So there was something, the emotions, and that's where the connection comes in. Is like I'm connecting to my emotions and saying something important is happening here. That was my first sort of realization of something important.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get into what made you make that jump, from being you were a contractor working for corporates, and then now you've flipped over the script and you're back into startup land. So I'm very interested in that. So maybe we talk about that next, and then afterwards I want to get into your series or your decades of different startups that you've been involved in. I want to start to piece together, when did this begin and how did it travel? But first of all, that last leap of faith, how did that happen? What happened there for you?
Well, it's a funny thing, really, because it wasn't a leap of faith. Actually, it was an opportunity presented by COVID. So I probably spent the last 6 months, 9 months, year thinking, I'm doing the same thing now. Things aren't changing here. The adventure in me is not, I don't know where to go. I've explored all the routes, and the excitement and the opportunity is no longer there. So basically, mentally, I was sort of starting to check out, and I always ask the questions like, are you learning? If you're learning, then it's interesting and you keep going. And I think I didn't feel I was learning, or learning that things were going to go a lot slower, and it was just not very motivating for me personally. So I was mentally,
I can see that.
And then I was given the gift of my contract coming to an end in the middle of COVID. So
wonderful.
Yes. So it was like, well. So I noticed these things I don't think happen. There's not really a moment in reality. I knew what I wanted. I knew in my heart that I couldn't label myself a business analyst and go back in. So I knew there was no way back. So it's almost like I don't know, it's like you close all the doors and then there's only one available to you. And I closed the job door as well. And to be honest, I didn't close that straight away. I looked for opportunities saying, well, in my heart, what can I go for that I can actually love?
Yeah.
And I looked for job opportunities which were more about social impact and transformation of organizations, where we recognize that the way we're doing things today is actually, well, in my language, I would say, is quite destructive to individuals. and it doesn't actually work because it doesn't work with the complexity of the world we live in. So it's like a lose-lose really. So so I did apply for a number of jobs, and they're all knocked back. Didn't get, I think, one interview, but I think that's like a gift as well, because and there are reasons that could have been the case. Won't go into the reasons that might have been the case, but
I think, as you say, when your heart's not in something, the level and depth in which you bring yourself to the party is very different, isn't it? Even though it might just seem like an application, but you've had to design a CV, you might have written a short cover letter, or you might not have, again, because your energies weren't in the right place, right? So obviously, if you don't have a connection to what you're doing, the response rate and the success that you'll get from it is probably not going to match. Well, it is going to match the energy that you put in, but it's not going to give you a result really, and all for the better, because we don't want to move too far away from doing what's within our heart, do we? Really?
No,
it's a very, very good point you raised there.
No,
Many people speak of a decision between the brain and the heart, don't they? And I've definitely experienced myself times where I feel like I'm intellectually thinking about something, and there's other times where I'm more in my intuition, right? How would you describe that process, and how would you get someone out of their head and into their heart?
Well, funny you should say that. Yeah, I mean, what I practice is spending time in nature, and ultimately it's about listening to your emotions, but in a sort of grounded way as well. The key thing is being grounded, so that you're not reacting to your stories you tell yourself about your own self-image. So for example, I don't know, I went for a walk along the canal yesterday trying to reflect on something. This is quite annoying. That phone will stop in a moment. So again, that irritation, that sort of vibe coming in. But yeah, I was walking along the canal just yesterday, and I do this now as this is work for me, is to go somewhere and say, well, I've got this problem to look at, and the thing I was looking at was about my tendency to be irritated, to be defensive to criticism. Something I'm working on at the moment is I can be sometimes, like, actually internally be quite driven to rage.
All right, you don't strike me as that kind of person at all,
Well, you wouldn't tell. You probably can't tell because I don't let it out, but it's still, that is how it feels. Well, it felt it was a few weeks ago. Anyway, so I was walking on the canal and saying, what is going on there? What do I need to do? How do I need to sort of change this? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And I did find myself talking of stories. I was walking on past this barge. There was all these wooden carvings on this barge. So someone was taking like tree trunks and carving them, and I just looked at them and quite appreciated them, and I was thinking, oh, I'd sort of be interested to meet the person who's made those. And I walked past them. I couldn't see anyone, but the door was open. And I thought, shall I say hello? Should I introduce myself? And no, I decided not to. I walked past, and that's sort of me. I'm not a particularly good person at making contact with people, but it's also like there's a bit of a story there. So I started seeing that as some sort of message to, improve on that. It's like a failing. It's a shortcoming. And after the feelings that come with that actually are quite negative. So if you sort of really, I think, tuned into yourself, as I'm constantly trying to do, I realized that I was going to take away a lesson about how you need to get into a habit of doing those sorts of things and stretching your boundaries and getting outside your comfort zone, which is all great. But actually, that's just sort of the person. That's who I am, really. It's not like crippling or anything. It's just my inner nature. So, and I think I sort of tuned in really and realized that was more of a judgment. I was taking a story about myself and say, well, everyone's different, and you're going to be good in some ways. Like I'm good in going deep into stuff.
Yeah,
wouldn't be. That's fine. And I'm not particularly good at connecting with people, or maybe having the courage to do that. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's not in my nature. And rather than trying to sort of fight it as if it's like some sort of failing, you can just go with it and say, well, that's if it was like a big problem, you could maybe tackle it. And we all evolve and change over time, so it's not that you don't change. But that was a story I was telling myself and getting distracted by it. Whereas the sort of true useful things, insights, were more when it resonates. You know, you get a sense of, a good sense. You know, you get a good feeling around things. So when you sort of see things in nature and it tells you something, like, I don't know how much you want to go into this, but what happened was the lesson I got was I was trying to figure out, what do I do to improve my tendency to get triggered, and go into this sort of internal rage thing. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes, and it can be. The other day it was quite bad. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's good to explore the repeated patterns that you don't want, right? Again, if you're asking those really profound questions like, who am I and what do I want? It's very important to start to look at yourself in this way. So yeah. Sorry, continue.
That's all right. So I was walking on this canal and there was a sign saying like wet water meadow. And this was on Monday. I don't know, I mean, for people who don't know, it's been raining quite heavily here over the past few days.
All right.
And I was like, canal, water meadow, canal, water meadow. Water meadow, it's more interesting, the adventure, right? So I've got to go that way just to see what it's like. Didn't really think about it at all, other than, oh, this is more interesting, so I'll just go this way. Water meadow, it's been raining a lot. It really is a water meadow. So I'm walking along in my boots and noticing, you know, the depth of water and thinking, this is actually getting into my boots. This isn't necessarily the smartest move. Well, I carry on walking anyway. And I remember noticing a little snail crossing my path. And I looked at it. And as soon as you see something and it attracts your attention, there's often there's a reason for that. And it's a personal reason. And for me, it was like, I found it quite useful thinking about moving slowly and just sensing things very carefully. So that was a little lesson about, when this happens to you, just slow right down, you know.
That's it. That's really good advice. Slow down, stay grounded, and try to seek understanding in your thought patterns and your emotional cycles. Don't just judge yourself off the bat. And I think I'm guilty of that at times as well. You know, you think I am like this, but we forget that, you know, we are like nature, right? Everything evolves. We evolve. We're not the same as we were when we were 10 years old, right? We're not the same as we were last year. We're probably very different to how we were last week, you know. Things change, you know, and sometimes that is in a moment. Sometimes you go on a walk, you end up in a meadow, you see the snail, and that does change something in your perception. And if that is an emotional experience, it kind of gets locked in your brain there, and you start to develop this new neural plasticity for being able to recall that new thing. And I think what happens on a kind of neuroscience level is that you've got two modes that your brain can be in. You've got type 1 and you've got type 2. Type 1 is mostly about going through the thought patterns and the cycles that are already established, i.e. it's reassuring, you find comfort, and it doesn't make you feel scared or out your comfort zone or anything like that, because you're just going through the same cycle of patterns that you've already got, right? Then there's, which would be this, on your walk, it would be like you going on the same walk that you do every day. And then type 2 is where you start to stretch yourself and you start to create brand new neural pathways. And to some degree, you might even start to challenge some of the old ones. So often people, when they take new choices, they feel maybe a little bit vulnerable. Maybe it's a little bit risky. You know, everyone gets a bit anxious before they get on stage or do something new, right? You know, me before this as well, I've never done this before. This is the first one, but we go with it, you know. Again, this is a part of my type 2 model happening, and it will start to question some of my type 1 programming, because why did I think that, why would I be anxious before this, you know? Do I need to be? Probably not. I need to just give it a go. But it's very interesting, this dance that we do continuously as people, especially for yourself as an adventurer, between what I've already got and what's coming next, you know. And sometimes we can plan it. Sometimes we can kind of make it happen for ourselves, you know, and we can do it solely in the mind as an intellectual exercise, and we can force ourselves to get there. But what I'm learning more and more is that it is much more about your intuition. That is what often leads to the best outcomes and the best ideas, actually. On that note, very interested in your startup experience, actually. So you mentioned 2010 was a pivotal year. You're going back to working with corporates because you needed to get some money in, probably, because you've been working for startups for a long time. But tell us, what startups have you worked in? Where did they range between? Let's do the full story first of all. What was the first startup that you got involved in?
So the end of, so it's basically every decade. I think that's the frequency.
Cool.
I worked end of the 90s with a friend of mine who was like, he's on that, what's the name of that? I mean, that French, very well known French sort of MBA type college.
All right.
Can't remember now, but you'd be impressed, or some people would be impressed if they hear it. Anyway, that's sort of by the by. But I just joined him as a sort of CTO, and it's about 6 months experience. It was a case of being in between jobs and being having the sort of, and being single and having the time and the capacity and the financial capacity just to go on the adventure, really, which did involve, got a bit of real, did involve a trip to Atlanta, a potential partnership,
Blimey.
doing a prototype based on sampling whiskies. It was all about making complex buying decisions. It's called something called conjoint analysis. I won't go into, but it was just
maybe in another one.
Yeah, and whiskey was quite a good example because that's quite complex and not straightforward how you make buying decisions. So he had this idea, and I was just supporting him making it happen, and theoretically providing the technical knowledge, which meant I knew a bit more than him, which wasn't difficult, but still didn't I knew that much. Anyway, so that was more of a probably 6-9 months, I think, journey, and it just he just sort of ran out of money, really ran out of time.
All right. So what was the name of that business?
Do you know, I want to say Kick Up the Arse because that was the original name for it, but
no, you can't. Okay, let's just call it Kick Up the Arse then, right?
Yeah,
let's just run with that working title, right? Yeah. But so your friend approached you and said, "We've got a prestigious university in France that are very interested in this more detailed form of analysis."
Well, yeah.
How did he start a business out of that? How did
well, it was like together? It would probably see it was. I mean, he was a graduate, an MBA from there, which brings a bit of kudos, but it was less sort of relevant in that way. But he was a marketing guy, so he knew about conjoint analysis from his background as a technique. If you like, it was sort of something to fuel the e-commerce at the time.
Like
a technology that would allow you plug into your website. So if you do have complex buying decisions, then it would help you possibly even tap into your intuition, arguably, where it's going to work. Because there's a subtle difference, identifying your preferences in a way that isn't possible when you just ask people very direct questions.
Yeah.
So it was just good fun, and he was a good friend, and we stayed friends, and it was just a bit of a blast, really. Just literally good fun, and that was it. And he didn't take in for 6 months, 9 months, and then got off at the other end. Say, well, that was fun, but time's run out now. I need to go back and work.
Did you make any money out of it, or did you make some connections out of it, or how did it
well, there was mainly this quite big company, well, something very nice in Atlanta, as I say, and nothing persisted for me beyond that. I think even he continued trying to make it work, and he's sort of gone on from other things and ended up migrating to Australia.
All right.
So nothing particular, no.
So what did you learn from that experience? It's quite a big one, isn't it? Being the CTO for 6 to 9 months of a very complex analysis tool, which could become technology, right at the boom, really, isn't it? Late 90s is just right at the boom of it
was, and then I think the funding was drying up, which is where we fell down. Really, was not able to get any funding. What did I learn? Well, I mean, the main thing I learned was I did enjoy the experience. So, and it's like chalk and cheese compared to like corporate life, but
can be, can't it? You're so prohibited, aren't you, in the corporate world, to sometimes follow through with some of your ideas and whatnot, and rightly so for business purposes, but arguably rightly so for business purposes. But the main thing is definitely enjoying the ride, isn't it? Enjoying the experience, and going with the flow of it. That's interesting. So that's what you learn from the first one.
Yeah.
What happens next in your startup story? 10 years later, where are we now?
Yeah, so sort of start of late 2000s. There's a bit of so I've been a peachy deal. I was actually at Lloyd's at the time. They keep recurring, and a friend of mine knew someone who's a sort of serial entrepreneur. He certainly had some entrepreneurial background, and wanted some people to help him with his startup. And it was a paid position, so it was a bit of a, this is too good to be true, because it's not what you expect normally. So it's no risk in a startup. Wow. I'm in. Um, and there was a guy, Charles Denton, who was the founder of. Oh, my memory is terrible. Gave him some credibility because he went on to become he was a director of Great Ormond Street. Is
Oh
oddly
wow.
enough one of the companies I applied to. But was part of terrible a soap firm whose name I can't a soap and sort of cleaning sort of grooming products firm whose name I can't quite get a finger on. Anyway, it was doing all right, but it gave a bit of kudos to the company because he was behind it. So he joined there, and I think within 2 months, the shine came a bit off as the bank withdrew lending facility, which meant a bit of a first in, first out. And most of the sort of, I think probably 3, 4, 5 of us who joined left, apart from me, who was like, well, this is what happens, right? It doesn't mean the idea is no good. You're lucky to be, you don't get paid normally, so why leave now if you're still bought into the idea? So it's largely me and the founder left, and I'd secured like a few days contract a week, which meant I could still just spin this one out of it.
Nice.
And that went fine up until I walked out. But this was a case of, and it was in the e-commerce space again. It was.
Do you remember what they were selling?
It was an auction. It was an auction related product. So there was this almost impossible, physically impossible technology whereby, yes, that was it. You're auctioning products and the price would drop. And the way it worked was you were paying for this because you're getting eyeballs. So the people keep bringing in. So it was supplementing the product as well. So effectively, you would draw in traffic and then give this thing away for free anyway because you've already paid for the eyeballs.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things are like this sort of kernel of an idea that someone's fallen in love with, and that's I think as startups we know is fine, but who's the customer? Where a lot of the time is spent trying to find the customer for this amazing idea. Anyway, so what happened towards the end was I was looking to get some sweat equity, and there was, in theory, interest in this, but there wasn't enough effort being put into it as far as I was concerned, and felt a bit peed off basically because it was more interested in making the business run and chasing the next opportunity, which is fine, but it's all about balance, right? And from where I was sitting, the balance was wrong, so we fell out, and I left.
All right, so you dusted yourself down. You went contracting, I guess, for a little while, and a lot of life happens in between the next 10-year period, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I suppose I should just say, to bring it up to speed, is then so my main lesson from that was you don't have to be following someone, you can be the entrepreneur yourself.
Okay.
Which then led me to start my own website, which was the other one is like do what you know. So being a business analyst and being interested in coaching people and mentoring people, started this website, BA Mentor, which was the sort of platform for a few different attempts at providing a service of business analysts. And this was where I was talking earlier about running away from. So I was really running away from by trying to create an independent revenue, which meant then I would have the luxury of time to go and pursue, discover what I actually wanted to do. It's not to say that what I was pursuing wasn't interesting to me. The idea of mentoring people was always appealing to me. So there was always around that idea of mentoring business analysts, and again, that being my profession. Therefore, I was in theory equipped to go and help with that. So there was a few things over the next decade around starting up, selling to big businesses around practices. So developing a BA practice, and they all sort of mentoring, and I did lots of complex things involving quite a lot of people. But none of them really generated a lot of money. So they never really achieved on that escape piece.
But you had some success in taking the idea to market and in getting some feedback from the people that wanted to use it, yeah?
Well, I did. Yes. I did have some success. And I think, sort of bringing up to speed again with a lesson was that it's all about motivation. And, obviously if you look up startups, it's all about What's the product? What's the product market fit? Who are your customers? Don't fall in love with your idea. All good stuff. But actually, what's a lot more motivating than making money is enjoying the journey.
Mhm.
So regardless, actually, in fact, I would say regardless of the money you make, and obviously there's a practical side to that, and that was, I was about to start a new business idea, having learned and sort of dusted myself off, and I just could not be bothered. I just didn't have any motivation. And I said to a coaching friend of mine, and said, look, what's going on? I really got no motivation to do this. I don't know why. This seems like the next thing to try out.
Yeah.
And he said to me, would you do this if you weren't getting paid for it? Like, no. In an instant, the insight. Oh, okay, I see. Right.
That is a great way to cut through the noise of the brain, isn't it? And get to the heart, isn't it?
Yes.
Take money off the table completely. If money wasn't a thing at all, if you didn't need money, if the world didn't need money, what would you like to do with yourself? Would you still do this?
Yeah. Which then leaves you the question of okay, so what is it that you do want to do?
Yeah, and then you're back to who am I and what do I want again? Yeah,
Exactly.
Very familiar with that cycle.
Was the sort of powerful thing for me, connecting myself to who I am.
Yeah, man.
If I'm not a business analyst, who am I? Alex Papworth is great because that's who I am, but how can I explain myself to the world? How can I at least start talking about who I am in a authentic, that's so genuinely authentic. Some of these words are overused, I don't like them, but authentically authentic, that's the closest description I'll get, and I don't feel any discomfort saying that or talking about it. So it must be,
Hey, I count that. I think that's a massive success, to be honest, mate. You set up your own. You had a concept in your mind. You made it a website. You thought about how to gather a community of people around that website. You then took the idea, you tested it, you supported some people, set up, BA practices. That's a blinding success. All right, you weren't able to monetize it, blah, blah, blah. That's okay. But like we say, business isn't always about the money. Business is just about trying out a new idea and getting some feedback on it. For me, I'm just a bit of an achievement freak. I just like the buzz. You take an idea, you test it out, and you see if it works. I don't know. It's very exciting. It makes you feel like a nutty scientist. I buzz off it. All right. So I guess also having that as a contractor, having a BA practice and that website probably helped your day rates climb up a little bit there as well. So maybe you did monetize it in some way.
Maybe not deliberately. But I mean, I was in that period. I was the president of the UK chapter of the International Institute of Business Analysts. So
wow,
that was and this is something I'm working on, because I tend to downplay these things. I'm immediately going to tell you the story about actually it was who wasn't stepping backward when the request went out at the time. But that's fine. That's just about poor succession planning as opposed to being in the right place at the right time. So that was positive. But so some good achievements.
Yeah, mate, sounds good. All right, so that leads us. Where did you go from there then? So we went from get a kick up the arse into BA practice online into now 10 years after that. Now we are at the bridge and a campfire, right?
Yeah.
So how did you dissect the learnings of the past so that you could start a new startup with you as the leader and feel confident in what you're doing?
Well, I suppose if you pick it up from the point of what would you do if you weren't getting paid for it?
Yeah.
Which is the real question. I responded to the positivity, really, the positive emotions. So the feeling inspired and excited I mentioned earlier, it was like, oh, okay, great. I'd like other people to have that. If I'm not a business analyst, what am I? What is my purpose? You need some sort of target. So that became my target, was about helping people find, as making a workplace a source of growth, a source of place you can thrive.
Yeah, man.
The flip of the worst cases of a place that can be quite destructive mentally.
Yeah.
And I'm not really interested in the I'm interested in the negative in that you can't avoid it, but I'm interested in like, well, no, let's forget that. Let's just make it a place where you really grow, and you love your job. I mean, I'm not suggesting everyone doesn't, but clearly I didn't for a period, and I'm
Yeah,
not alone. So
definitely not.
listen to the positivity. Pay attention to yourself. What is it that gives you your buzz? In the same way as you were saying about the impact freak. I'm not particularly focused by impact, I must admit, but that's just, we're different, so that's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm interested in the deep stuff, in the reflective and the meaning making and the playing and the being curious about things. That's what interests me. So if you give me, the more of that you give me, the more fun I'm going to have. And if I can find a way of doing that, then that's good. So this whole thing is about exploring things. There are no answers. It's just saying, in fact, it's asking more questions than answering them. And I have a very big appetite for that. I'm not completely focused on exploring because I'm quite practical as well, actually. I don't want to just explore deeply in order to explore more deeply in order to explore more deeply.
Yeah.
But that's also why I've come to look at nature, because when I was sort of plumbing the depths, if you like, and say, well, what is really going on? I was, you were there in terms of reading all the books and what's the business book we need to read now, and the agile book, whatever. I just thought, it's not a waste of time, but you can't just spend the rest of your career reading the next book with the actual answer. You've got to shortcut this, and that's an entrepreneurial. There is entrepreneurs are lazy.
Yes, yeah.
This is taking too long. How can we get there quicker? So this is
Mm.
my entrepreneurial question: was where's the answer? At least that's some principles I can work from, and then work out practices. So that was logically just led me to nature, was natural law, natural principles, however you want to frame it. If I can understand what that actually means in my life, as a human who's also part of nature, and that's where we talk about positivity is feedback. Nature's full of feedback loops, and humans have feedback loops galore, interfering feedback loops, which are quite confusing. Which is where nature comes in as well, because if you can ground and you can actually start to see through your own stories, your own bullshit, then you're in a powerful place, actually.
Definitely,
You
definitely.
can tap into the intuition, and it does feel a bit of a leap of faith sometimes, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's an interesting use of like leap of faith. I said that earlier as well. It's I kind of, the more that I find being grounded is helpful, which is a no-brainer. Once you start to experience being grounded, you start to realize that, oh, this is how I should be all the time. I was like, so I shouldn't be 101 ideas all the time. I should actually be literally grounded. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, literally grounded, meaning like you can feel the weight and the depth of your feet on the ground, and you can feel yourself within your stance and within your body. Like, it's about inhabiting yourself, isn't it? Feeling grounded just in your body. And I think we're not taught any of that. We're not taught that in schools, are we? That you need to inhabit your body and you need to learn your physicality. We're also not taught about grounding. We're not even taught about meditation, which is crazy to me, actually, that we don't even introduce meditation to people at a very young age, just as a way of understanding your thoughts and your emotions, and being able to figure out what is true for you. What is your heart telling you, as we were talking about earlier. Yeah, very important. All right, mate, I think that brings us near enough to the end there. So how can people get hold of you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn under Alex Papworth.
Wicked.
Or The Bridge and the Campfire, which I think probably best to put a link to the kind of the YouTube if you can do that. But if you search that Bridge and Campfire, which is intended for people who are trying to find a different path, who are questioning what they're doing today, maybe because they're in a career that they're questioning the value of, an industry they don't like. It's actually for anyone who's just really questioning more deeply and saying, what else can I do? And who wants to connect with like-minded souls.
Much needed at this point in time in life, and COVID and all that sort of stuff going on as well. fantastic platform for people to be able to come, you know, in a supported environment where they're able to speak openly, listen to others that are probably in a similar position. So definitely, mate, if you obviously send me over a link, we'll make sure it's in the description below. And yeah, hopefully people will reach out to me and go from there.
Can I just add a couple of words to that?
Definitely.
Because the essence, which we haven't talked about, well, we sort of intimated it, but is I spent the last year training to be a coach, but what I call a natural systems coach, as you know, because it is based on connecting to our own nature, connecting to the outer nature and inner nature is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Is using outer nature to understand ourselves. And also one of my adventures is helping other people go on their own, follow their own path, and walk alongside them as a coach, maybe point out some things along the way. Something is emerging called Into the Woods. That's sort of related very closely to the campfire, but you like it stepping away from the campfire and going a bit deeper, maybe going somewhere a little bit darker, walking alongside someone who's wants to find what gives the most joy, I suppose, ultimately.
Yeah. Very powerful metaphors. I like the way you've designed that, actually. I like the way you've laid that out. Campfire does what it says on the tin, right? It's a bunch of people sitting around exchanging stories, listening openly, feeling very warm with each other. And yeah, the walk in the woods with an expert guide that will help you see things that maybe you hadn't noticed before, maybe even in the same woods that you've walked every day. You start to share that with someone, and you start to realize new areas to look in. I always see it like a spotlight whenever you coach someone, or when you've received coaching as well. It's sort of similar to therapy as well, in a way. It's like, so you're only pointing your spotlight in that direction most of the time. And actually what expert coaches are able to do, they kind of guide you to start to open that perspective, so your spotlight can see much more of the woods that you're kind of metaphorically going in. So yeah. All right, mate. Anything else you want to chuck out there to the people before we call it a day?
No. I mean, there are a few adventures in the thicket somewhere. I don't know, emerging, but we'll talk about them as and when they something more material to talk about.
Wicked, mate. All right, cool. So you heard it here first, man. Alex Papworth, Bridging the Campfire. Find him on LinkedIn. There's going to be a link below this video. And obviously, if you're a startup and you're looking to expand very quickly and you've got a working recipe, there's another link down there for you below for our Partners in Growth program. So I'll see you there.